One of my favorite books of all time is But What If We're Wrong by Chuck Klosterman. One of my favorite books. Top 10, top 15, I would say. You might be saying to yourself, Rich, you're holding that book upside down. And to that, I would say to you, thinking about the present as if it were the past. Chuck Klosterman. One of the most clever book cover designs. He had a stretch where I would say Chuck is one of my favorite writers. And he had a stretch there where he would use his very minimal black and white aesthetic. And it's so clean, isn't it? I love this book so much that there was a time I was in Paris and I was in the notorious Shakespeare and Company bookstore. And I was in the philosophy section, or like a thinky section. And a young woman came up to me and she said, "What book would you recommend?" And among all the Platos and the Voltaires and the Descartes and Sartre and Nietzsche, whatever philosopher, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, whatever you want to mention, I was like, "But What If We're Wrong" by Chuck Klosterman. This is the best book. And I stand behind that. She bought the book too. I stand behind that because what this book did is frame a perspective that has always been on my mind. If you're able to view your time on Earth and in history and in the human story, if you're able to like zoom out and look at it more objectively, what would you discover? How would you think differently, right? I think, if we're in the future, how will they view us the way we often view people, society, culture, from the past? There's a bias towards the own time you live in. You want to think that, this is the greatest time in human history. We're at the pinnacle of technology and leisure and a lot of different things, but we can get caught in that, and there can be an arrogance to it, and we get comfortable and we don't pursue curiosity. We don't look to make things better, if you were to look back at someone, people in, say, like 1910, you'd be like, what? They thought that, So it's thinking, and it frames your mind. It helps frame your mind to think, what today will be viewed differently in the future? What are we doing now that will be obvious in the future that we were doing it wrong? You know what I mean? And Chuck does a great job of making reading fun. He is a former rock music critic, pop culture writer, and so it's very fun. He uses a lot of pop culture examples, so it's not dry like a lot of philosophy. I don't even know if he would describe it as philosophy, but it is probably his most deeper thinking inspired reading. He uses a number of different, and it's a compilation of like essays based on like different ideas or questions, right? One of the ideas he has is rock music. 200 years from now, how will rock music be remembered by people? The obvious choice is the Beatles, but because there's four and we tend to remember things in singular forms, rock music might be remembered more towards Bob Dylan, and maybe your voice wasn't as important as the songwriting and what you said, or more like Elvis. And and flashy and big and taking music from other sources. Chuck Berry was his answer, though. Was it Chuck Berry? No. I gotta read it again. Or like the U.S. Constitution. In the future, something so sacred made people unwilling to change and adapt it over the time. So then does it become actually almost like the constricting force of freedom rather than like an idea of freedom? I have to read this again. This is such a great book. But what if we're wrong? Thinking about the present as if it were the past, it does such a great job, I think, of inspiring you to just think outside the norm, to question things that are and provoke your curiosity.